I suffered from severe mental health issues. Perhaps I wasn't the only one who went through such a phase, but at that time, I felt like I was stuck in an endless loop with no way out. I always lived according to other people's expectations, as if my life was just a mirror reflecting the eyes of others. Every criticism, every judgment felt like a dagger stabbing straight into my already fragile self-esteem. I no longer knew what I wanted or needed, and I even forgot who I truly was. There were moments when I questioned my existence, wondering if there was any point in continuing to live a life that didn't belong to me. The weight of constantly seeking validation from others had crushed my spirit, and the person I once was slowly disappeared behind a facade built to please everyone else. Those days were a long chain of sleepless nights, hours spent sitting alone in the dark, feeling powerless and drained. I suffered from anxiety, and sometimes even depression. The voices in my head never stopped, constantly reminding me that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't talented enough, and that I was worthless if I couldn't meet the expectations of others. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw only a stranger, someone empty and exhausted. I would try to smile, to reassure myself that things would eventually get better, but the smile felt fake, and the hollow eyes staring back at me only deepened my sadness. I felt like I was disappearing into a void, one where no one could reach me, and the loneliness became unbearable. Those days, I wasn't just mentally torn apart, my body also endured extreme stress. I often felt exhausted, with no motivation to do anything. Every daily activity became a challenge. The headaches lingered, and every morning I woke up with a feeling of emptiness and hopelessness. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, and I wasn't even sure if I could survive each day. Simple things like getting out of bed, brushing my teeth, or even eating felt like monumental tasks. The world outside seemed so far away, and I found myself isolating from friends and family, not because I didn't want their help, but because I didn't know how to ask for it. I felt ashamed of my weakness, and the more I withdrew, the more the hopelessness grew. One day, amidst the depths of despair, I decided to do something different. It wasn't a grand or inspiring decision. It was simply a faint glimmer of hope, a thought that maybe I could do something to change. I signed up for a self-development class. At first, I attended the class just because I thought it would help me get through the difficult moments and perhaps quiet the negative voices in my head. I had no expectations, and I doubted whether it would truly make a difference. I remember walking into the room feeling overwhelmed by anxiety, unsure if I even belonged there. The fear of being judged never left me, but something inside me urged me to give it a try. The class didn't change my life overnight, but it was the first step that allowed me to gradually see a shift in my thinking. The first few days in the class were not easy. I had to sit and listen to others share their stories, and when I looked at myself, all I saw was weakness and failure. But slowly, I realized that I wasn't the only one feeling that way. The people around me, despite their differences in appearance, occupation, or circumstances, all had their own pains, and all were trying to find a way to overcome them. Their courage to share their struggles helped me see that vulnerability was not a weakness, it was a sign of strength. It made me realize that perhaps, just perhaps, I could learn to be open about my own struggles too. I began to understand that self-love was not selfish or irresponsible as I had once thought. Instead, loving myself meant accepting who I was, with all my flaws and imperfections. Self-love meant knowing that I deserved happiness, regardless of whether others recognized it or not. It wasn't easy because I had grown used to evaluating my worth based on how others perceived me. But through each class, I started to find a little light in my darkness. I started to understand that my value was inherent, not something dictated by achievements or by others' opinions. I began practicing small affirmations, telling myself each day that I was enough, even if I wasn't perfect. In addition to the class, I turned to yoga and meditation. Yoga sessions helped me reconnect with my body once again. For the first time, I began paying attention to my body, feeling each breath, each movement, and realizing that my body, despite all the pain and stress it had endured, was still there to keep me alive. I felt grateful for myself, for my body and mind that had endured and overcome so much. Each pose, no matter how simple or difficult, was a reminder that my body deserved kindness and care. I found myself focusing on the present moment, on the rhythm of my breathing, and in those moments, the chaos in my mind seemed to quiet down. The initial yoga sessions were truly challenging. My body was stiff, and so was my mind. There were times when the pain made me want to give up. But little by little, I felt the change. My body became more flexible, my breath became more even, and my mind gradually calmed down. Not everything was perfect, but I began to appreciate the small efforts I made to improve myself. I remember the first time I managed to hold a difficult pose, and the sense of accomplishment that filled me. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental, a reminder that progress, no matter how slow, was still progress. It taught me to be patient with myself and to celebrate every small step forward. Meditation helped me listen to myself without judgment. As I sat in silence, I learned to observe my thoughts as if they were clouds passing through the sky. At first, I faced many difficulties. The voices in my head kept reminding me of my mistakes, fears, and insecurities. But gradually, I stopped trying to push away the negative thoughts. Instead, I learned to accept them and realize that they did not define my worth. The criticisms from others gradually lost their power. I no longer looked into the eyes of others to define myself but started seeking acceptance from my own heart. The practice of sitting still and breathing allowed me to reconnect with my inner self, and slowly, I started to feel a sense of peace. I began to understand that my thoughts were not facts, and I could choose which ones to give power to. Day by day, I started doing things that I had always avoided because of fear. I dared to say no to unreasonable demands from others, and I learned to set boundaries for myself. This wasn't easy, as I had grown used to pleasing everyone. The first time I said no, I felt guilty, worried that I would lose others' acceptance. But then I realized that setting boundaries didn't make me selfish. On the contrary, it helped protect me from unnecessary pressure and gave me space to breathe. I began to recognize the importance of my own needs and realized that I deserved respect and care, just like anyone else. I learned that I could not pour from an empty cup, and taking care of myself was essential if I wanted to be there for others. I started to spend time on small hobbies that I had once abandoned, such as reading books, drawing, or simply walking in the park. I felt a sense of freedom when I no longer had to race to please everyone. I remember the mornings when I woke up without feeling the pressure to be someone that others expected me to be. I read books that inspired me, listened to music that brought peace to my soul. I found joy again in simple things, small yet meaningful moments. I picked up a sketchbook that had gathered dust for years, and I began drawing again. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and it brought me a sense of fulfillment that I hadn't felt in a long time. I allowed myself to be creative without worrying about whether it was good enough. Gradually, I realized that self-love wasn't just an action but a long journey. It was a lifelong commitment to myself, a gentleness when facing mistakes, and the courage to keep going even when the path seemed unclear. There were days when I felt like I was back at square one, days when my mind was full of negative thoughts. But instead of blaming myself, I learned to forgive myself. I learned to accept that there would be imperfect days, and that was okay. Each setback became a lesson, a chance to grow, and I began to understand that growth wasn't linear. I started to view my journey as a series of ebbs and flows, and I embraced the ups and downs with grace. There was beauty in imperfection, and the more I accepted that, the lighter I felt. I was no longer someone obsessed with being perfect in the eyes of others. Instead, I became someone true to myself. I learned to love the imperfect parts of me, and I began to realize that my value did not depend on what others thought of me. I found strength in my weaknesses and found joy in simplicity. I stopped comparing myself to others and began to accept and appreciate my own journey. I learned that the person I was becoming was someone worth loving, not because of what I could achieve, but because of who I inherently was. I began to trust my intuition, to make choices based on my own desires and not out of fear of disapproval. Slowly, I felt the layers of my old self peeling away, revealing a person I could finally be proud of. In the end, the lesson I learned from this journey is that self-love is not something distant or too difficult. It is not a destination to be reached but a journey to be taken every day. It is about being grateful for my life, accepting even the imperfect parts, and believing that I deserve happiness and love, whether it comes from within or from others. When we love ourselves, we find true peace, and we are also able to love and accept others more genuinely. The journey of self-love taught me to be patient, compassionate, and forgiving, not just towards myself but towards others as well. It allowed me to let go of unrealistic expectations and to find joy in being authentically me. Everyone has their own unique value, and the journey of self-love is about finding that value. Not to prove it to anyone else, but to feel that we, inherently, are already wonderful. We don't need to be anything other than ourselves to be worthy. Embracing who we are, flaws and all, is the most powerful thing we can do. This journey is far from over, but I now walk it with a lighter heart, knowing that I am enough, just as I am. How about you? How is your journey of loving yourself? Please comment below to let me know. Let's grow together. Thank you everyone for patiently listening to my story.